a few days in to NHL Free Agency 2025, basically at the end of the first week, of course we need to start grading them. Who is doing what? Who are the winners and the losers and the grades so far? We've got 3 from each side, 3 winners, 3 losers. Let's go over who is making the most amount of noise in this NHL Free Agency. For the biggest winner, let's not overthink it, okay? Biggest winner so far of NHL Free Agency has to be the Florida Panthers. Okay, they've won back-to-back Stanley Cups. They've had a pretty busy month, the last month, doing this again. And they didn't get necessarily better, but they definitely didn't get worse. And they're the best team in the NHL. They are working miracles once again. We'll see what this looks like in a couple of weeks with some depth guys like Evan Rodriguez on the second line, whether he will still be around. That looks like someone that Florida is potentially looking to shop. But they keep that world's greatest third line intact. Not sure why there's no picture of Brad Marchand's jersey, but Luosterainen, Lundell, Marchand. When you have a Stanley Cup champion, a back-to-back Stanley Cup champion that can keep a third line intact, that never, ever happens. We see it with championship teams in every single sport. You're not able to keep your depth guys, your role players, because you just won a championship. And they go out and they make more money. Not the case with the Florida Panthers. They are able to retain Marchand, Aaron Ekblad, and Conn Smythe winner Sam Bennett all in the same offseason, where there were a lot of analysts thinking they would only be able to keep one of 3. They kept all 3. No doubt the biggest winners by not really going out and getting anybody are the Florida Panthers. Once again, they are sticking around. The three-peat is a very, very real possibility. I just hate to break it to you guys. On to loser number 1. Certainly not the Florida Panthers. Loser number 1 goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying they're not going to make the postseason, but they are certainly one of the losers so far in NHL Free Agency. You don't lose a 100-point scorer in their prime and take them off your top line and not be a loser the first couple of days of free agency. Like, there's still a lot of questions, I would say, on that first line for Toronto. With Michelli coming in, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know a ton about him. Matthew Nyes on the other side. I love Matthew Nyes. I wouldn't have hated it if there were a couple of teams that offer sheeted him out there, because I think he is going to be a special player. But he is someone who scored 20 goals once. You know, you need to get some consistency out of him. And he also had the best playmaking winger on the planet on his line his whole career. Same with Austin Matthews. Don't think Austin Matthews is going to take a huge dip, but he was clearly something wrong with him at the end of that season. He wasn't terribly effective offensively for the back half of the NHL season, certainly not in the postseason. It wasn't in the Four Nations as well. His 200-foot game has certainly gotten better. He's not the problem on this team, but you just look up and down that lineup, and it is not overloaded with skill, even when you take just one guy basically out of it in Mitch Marner. You got Michelli down there. I think Nicholas Waugh is a decent player. Bobby McCann as a winger on your second line. I know it's with Tavares and Nylander, so that should cover up a lot, but that's not striking fear into a lot of opponents. It's really not. And in an Atlantic division where Montreal has gotten better, I believe, in this offseason, that could spell another 2-3 matchup for Toronto. I think even if Florida coasts in the regular season, kind of like they did this year, they could still win the very tough Atlantic division. I think Tampa can win the division. And I think Montreal, yes, has a real outside shot. That would need, of course, Florida and Tampa to kind of coast like they did through most of this regular season. But Toronto is in a bit of a predicament here with the first-year Sands Core 4. They are my first loser of this offseason, this free agency period, I should say. Winner number 2, the winner of the free agency period so far that a lot of experts are picking are the Vegas Golden Knights. A lot of experts, a lot of analysts saying these are the number 1 winners of free agency so far because of the Mitch Marner deal. I'm sticking with Florida because they were the best team in the league the last 2 years, and they kept everybody. which is so difficult to do for a championship team. But for Vegas, of course, the reason why they're a huge winner is adding Mitch Marner. I know there's questions about Mitch Marner and parts of his game, but the bottom line is this. He is a 100-point scorer. Just once, but he's also been at 95 or above. I want to say like 2 or 3 other times. He is the best playmaking winger in the league. He's one of the best defensive wingers in the league, or at least one of the best two-way wingers in the league. And you got him in his prime at something of a discount. I'm not going to get way into the state taxes thing, but I think there are a lot of other teams that would have had to pay Mitch Marner $14 million a year. Vegas goes 8 by 12. He obviously becomes the highest paid player on their team. And for this year anyway, we'll see if Jack Eichel goes in free agency. But for this year anyway, in 2025-26, they've got one of the scariest first lines in all of hockey, man. Dorofeyev, Eichel, and Mitch Marner. That is a lethal top line. That's as good as anybody in the NHL on the top line. And then that second line ain't too shabby either to have a 30-goal scorer at centering your second line like Tomas Hertl alongside Mark Stone and Ivan Barbashev. That is fantastic. Their depth is still pretty good. I think it failed them in the postseason last year after getting decent returns in the regular season from Brandon Saad and Riley Smith and, of course, William Karlsson. You got a couple of goals in the playoffs from Brett Howden. But I think that depth still, if they kind of catch lightning in a bottle, should be good enough for them. But those first two, that top 6, is fantastic for Vegas. Just phenomenal. Adding Mitch Marner to that is almost like a cheat code. It's nearly unfair. That said, the problem why I don't give this an A++ and make them the biggest winner of the free agency period so far is this. They get shut out the last 2 games of that Edmonton series. They really needed some offense in the postseason when push came to shove. You went out and got the best player on the market, Mitch Marner. But what is his big question mark? Can he consistently produce in the postseason? Can he produce in the big games in the postseason? He hasn't scored a goal in his postseason career in a game later than Game 5. Okay? He doesn't do it. He folds in the big moments. And his play style, at least offensively, is not adaptive to how you play postseason hockey. And I think that's a bit of a problem that Vegas had this past year in the postseason, even after winning their division and looked like they could have been the team out of the West to go to the Stanley Cup final. That is a huge question mark. So you do get better in the regular season, which does matter, but you already won the division last year. You needed some help producing in the postseason. And Mitch Marner might not give you that. I think there is a difference in the context here of not playing in the fishbowl that is Toronto, his hometown team. That is a huge difference to go out there and play in Vegas. I know they've got good crowds and everything, but let's not kid ourselves. They do not treat it the way Toronto treats it. So maybe this takes a little bit off the shoulders for Mitch Marner. It certainly did for Jack Eichel when he got out there. It looked like there was new life in Tomas Hertl's career when he went out there. It's going to need to be Mitch Marner in the playoffs in May that would make them probably the biggest winners of the free agency period so far. But they need that. And I just can't guarantee that they get that. Loser number 2. We're really splitting hairs between loser number 2 and loser number 3, by the way, for the biggest loser free agency period so far. Loser number 2 of the 2025 NHL free agency, the Boston Bruins. There's just such a lack of direction with this team. When I look at some of the other ones, it's about, playoff teams getting better or teams that are playoff teams, kind of losing their spot when it comes to the winners and losers of this list. Toronto, I think, is getting worse. I think the Bruins are getting marginally worse, but they were pretty bad last year too. Like there's not a lot of room for them to get worse, but they are certainly finding ways. I'm not sitting here saying the Bruins should have even gone out and made a big splash. I did some videos about it. I think Brock Besser or Nikolaj Ehlers was a possibility, but this was not a great free agent class. I wasn't expecting the Bruins to go out there and make 2 or 3 big splashes and spend a bunch of money and become a playoff team right away. But what I don't understand is clearly they're going into some sort of tank mode, but they are spending money. You don't have to spend money if you're going into tank mode. And what they did was sign a bunch of fourth liners for every other team, third and fourth liners for the Bruins. And in the case of Victor Arvidsson, a second liner. You went out and you signed a bunch of bottom six, fourth line grinders who can't put the puck in the net. And you did it for term. You locked these guys down. You know, all these guys were on multi-year contracts, except for Victor Arvidsson, who you traded for. And the magnum opus of this is Tanner Jeannot for 5 years and $3.5 million a year. Nobody was giving him that term or that dollar amount. When you are overpaying for any player on term and dollar amount, that's a massive failure. When you're overpaying for a fourth liner on dollar amount and term, you're a giant loser. There's no other way to put it. There's no other way to categorize it. Okay? All of the projections had Tanner Jeannot going at most 2 years and at most about $2 million. And the Bruins gave him 5 at $3.5 a year just to get a little taller. Don Sweeney saying, I don't know if he's going to get to 27 goals again in a season. I've got a spoiler alert for you. He's not. Since he had 27 goals in 21-22, he's played almost 200 NHL games and he's only gotten 26 goals. So he's not going to get there. So that's what I don't understand about the Bruins. They could just tank this year, and I think a lot of the fan base would be relatively okay with it, knowing that they're not going anywhere. It's a loaded draft next year. Anybody who can have a chance at Gavin McKenna after what the Islanders pulled off in the draft lottery this year, you take that chance. But the Bruins are spending money. Like, they're spending up to the cap. They're trading draft picks for Sean Corrali and Victor Arvidsson and Tanner Jeannot and Michael Ehlers. After extending some of their AHL guys they haven't given a shot yet, it just doesn't make any sense to me. They're not even tanking right. Nobody knows the direction in which this team is going. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I think the masterpiece of this is the Bruins sold at the trade deadline, right? Like, they really sold their soul. They gave up Marchand, they gave up Carlo, they gave up a couple of these other guys, Charlie Coyle, and they got some draft capital. They got a few prospects. They really kind of set up for a short-term tank. And then they went out and got Tanner Jeannot. Because let's look at the side-by-side for another guy the Bruins traded at the trade deadline because they didn't want to extend him in free agency. Okay? I'll move myself over here if I can. Okay, look at these side by side, Trent Frederic and Tanner Jeannot. Tell me which one the Bruins were willing to let walk because they didn't want to extend anything for him, and which one they signed to a 5-year contract. You got rid of Trent Frederic, and you just got a poor man's Trent Frederic for 5 years. It doesn't make any sense. Nothing the Bruins are doing makes any sense, and that's why they are big loser number 2. Winner number 3 for me in this free agency class, the Vancouver Canucks. Now, stick with me on this one because I think a lot of people are talking about the Carolina Hurricanes right now, and I like the deals that they have made. I'm wishy-washy on Keandre Miller. I think he does have plenty of upside, and playing in a second pairing there with Jalen Chatfield, I think is a good fit. And they still could get Nikolaj Ehlers. If they get Nikolaj Ehlers, I think that absolutely is a huge win for the Carolina Hurricanes, and I would have to readjust this list. But Vancouver, I'm taking a shot on here, okay? A Vander Kane deal, I can take it or leave it. But I think getting Brock Besser back as a 50-point scorer at 7 years by 7.25 with this free agency class is a win for the Canucks. I was thinking Brock Besser with the forwards that were going in this free agency class is pretty thin. I thought Besser was going to be able to get $8 or $9 million a year on the open market, and it looked like he was done with Vancouver entirely. Instead, he comes back at a cheap price, and that's a pretty formidable first line, especially, of course, and this is a huge part of Vancouver's season, if Elias Pettersson bounces back. I'm a Pettersson fan. I think he will bounce back. And you look at those wingers, if they continue to produce like next year when the cap goes up even more and Brock Besser and Jake DeBrusk are making a combined $15 million a year on a cap that's going to be up towards about 110, that's a really nice kind of value there. There's still a lot of pieces or a lot of question marks that need to be answered for this Vancouver team. But I think after that kind of free agency, they can be a playoff team again. And maybe I'm just selling too high on Brock Besser, but I like the deals that Vancouver has made, even just to retain some guys. They obviously needed to get rid of a lot of the drama in the locker room. That's a huge question mark for them. But if they do, that's a team that should be making the postseason right there. Not winning the Pacific Division or anything, but should be pretty good. Biggest loser of NHL free agency so far has to be the LA Kings. I ain't even looking at the forward group for the LA Kings because you don't need to look any further than that D-core. Tanner Jeannot, who they let go, obviously, is maybe the worst signing of this free agency, but the only other ones that have arguments are the two guys that the LA Kings got on their third D pairing. Brian Dumoulin and Cody Ceci. $8.5 million tied in next year for your third D pairing. What are you doing, man? This is a team that was not far off, has not been far off the last couple of years. I would have loved to see the Kings actually add some offensive talent. Instead, they went in on defense with new GM and new coach, and they're tying up $8.5 million in their third D pairing. So weird one, man. They didn't let a lot of quality go out the door, right? Gavrikov, you can say. I'm wishy-washy on that one. Tanner Jeannot, Caleb Jones, David Rittich. I don't even know who that goaltender is. And so you didn't let a lot walk out the door for a team that's been banging on the door the last couple of years. You add Armia, Corey Perry, take it or leave it. But Cody Ceci and Brian Dumoulin, the writing has been on the wall for those guys the last year or two that they are not what they used to be, even if what they used to be was overrated. And they went out and got him for $8.5 million for your third D pairing. In no way, shape, or form is that smart. No way. LA Kings, biggest loser of free agency so far. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know your biggest winners, your biggest losers in this first week of free agency. Let me know in the comments section below. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are excited about your team's outlook on the 2025-26 season. And Bruins fans, you can like and subscribe too, because we all know how that goes. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're going to roll on in just a second, but check out all the other videos on the channel. We come to you live at high noon Eastern time every weekday, and then wherever you get your podcasts as well. I'm your host, Cam Stuart. Zach Burke keeps us on the air 5 days a week.